welcome to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I am your host, as always, Jeremy, here to try to make the world seem a little more normal. And today, we might achieve that, we might not, who knows. But as always, there's a guest to try to help me accomplish this goal. And that guest today is Dr. Randy Overbeck, who is a author of the Haunted Shores Mysteries book series, which, from what I looked at, seemed very fascinating. And he's also a podcaster of the Great Stories About Great Storytellers podcast, which we'll be talking about all that and much more tonight. But first things first, how you doing today, Randy?
I am doing great. It was a beautiful day here in Ohio. We're getting ready to get deluged like everybody else in the nation, but today was
Yes.
for Ohio in January to have a day of 55 and sun. That's a good day.
Yeah, I mean, it's already snowing here. We already got an inch or two, but we'll see how it goes. Don't want my kids to hear me, but they already have no school tomorrow. But don't want them to hear that yet, though, because I want them to go
I'm
to bed
sure
at
they're
this
hoping
time.
not. I understand.
I'm sure,
I,
but
I was in education for 40 years, so I lived that life for a long time.
well, there you go. So, first question I always ask on this show is, what got you into the paranormal? And I'm especially interested in this because you're an author of it. So,
Yeah, and I think, and I've listened to several of your guests, and I think my bona fides are certainly not in their category. I would have to say that I kind of accidentally or as a sidetrack ended up in the paranormal. I've always been a general quiet believer in the world of ghosts. I don't have any personal experiences in that, like some of your other guests have, but I have always maintained. Shakespeare said it best. In Hamlet, he says, "There is more to your world. There's more to your philosophy. There's more to this world than it ever dreamt of in your philosophy." Horatio, and that's exactly and my research and what I have read. There are just too many things for which there is no quote rational explanation. But about maybe 7 or 8 years when I was in the very initial start of researching for the first book in the trilogy, the Haunted Shore Mysteries, Blood on the Chesapeake. I was actually attending a writers' conference in Indiana, and the session that I had wanted to attend was canceled. And I'm fishing around to try. The person didn't show. I was fishing around for another one, and it just turns out that there was a ghost hunting group called the Paranormal Society of Indiana, Central Indiana, CIPDPS, that was putting on a presentation. I went, what the heck? I'll go. I can tell you that I was absolutely blown away. What they had done for their session was that they had showed the scientific evidence they had collected at one ghost hunting event at in a space that was supposed to be haunted, and they told us about all the equipment that they brought and what they used and stuff, and they played a recording of what they claimed, and I now probably agree with that, was the voice of a female ghost trapped in this particular area. But what really blew me away was this. So I don't know how many of your listeners know this because I've not heard all of your podcasts, but and I am certainly no expert as far as the ghost hunters go, but most ghost hunting groups, one piece of equipment they bring is a very sensitive temperature thermometer. This particular group not only brought the thermometer, they brought a video camera focused on the thermometer, and it stayed focused the entire time, continuously playing for the 3 hours that they were there. Then they tell this group, now keep watching. They said, in this space, I'm going to guess here because I don't remember exactly, but the temperature was in the 60s, probably low 60, 61, 62. It's an empty building. And they said, keep watching. And in 10 seconds, the thermometer dropped 20 degrees. And then after about 2 minutes, popped back up. And they actually then fast forwarded. This occurred 3 different times in during their 3 hours of ghost hunting that they had done. I've since learned that this is an extremely common phenomena of ghost appearances all over the world. There's hundreds of documented examples for which there is no scientific answer for why this room, a 10 by 20 room, temperature would drop 20 degrees in 10 seconds. And that's kind of got my feet wet, so to speak.
Interesting. And from there, that made you want to write a book about this.
Well, from there, it made me want to do a lot of research first to kind of get the details on. Because one of the things now, my books are all. I want to be modest about this. I try really hard to make all of my books very realistic and believable in all aspects. So they all take place in a certain location and all the details. So, for example, the first book takes place on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay. And for people who have visited there, they will find all these places, restaurants, all these places that they've gone to, very meticulously detailed in the books, in that first book. I wanted to make sure that the details that I provided for the ghosts have the same level of reality of all the rest of my writings. One of the things that I try to do very differently from nearly all other ghost books. I am a fan of ghost fiction. I have read a lot of ghost fiction. Nearly all ghost fiction falls into two categories. There, on the one hand, you have what I call the Stephen King ghost fiction, the fiction that you read that is designed to terrify you and keep you up at night. And the other side of that coin is what I call Casper the Friendly Ghost. And that's usually a cozy that's writing about this friendly ghost that helps solve mysteries and all that kind of stuff. Neither one of what I found in my research is neither one of those extremes is anchored in the documented reality that I uncovered. So I wanted to make sure that the way my ghosts interact in my books is actually what has been documented by those people who are doing an honest, hard job of trying to use scientific methods to identify what's going on in terms of the spirit world interacting with the human world.
Interesting. And I'm sure your readers do appreciate that. That would make a lot of these books a lot more interesting, is that they're actually based in reality. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a huge Stephen King fan, but a lot of the stuff he writes in his books, I know is not going to happen.
Right. Well, if he were on your cat, he would tell you he doesn't expect people to believe it will happen. That's not really the point. You know, you're suspending your disbeliefs to be able to go ahead and jump on that. But the ghosts in my books never do anything. I might hedge a little bit. They really never do anything that ghosts haven't already documented as having occurred. They don't solve any mysteries. They don't come up with information that other people don't have. Ghosts can't do that. At least according to my research, they're not able to do that.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I've heard like fringe cases where, this medium says a ghost will help them solve a mystery, but still, that's not the ghost solving the mystery per se. That's the medium going by what the ghost says to solve the mystery.
So. Supposedly, yes, right, exactly, right.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, I mean, I try really hard to stay close to what I could find documentation for, because I think there's a lot more reality there than what other people kind of dismiss.
Well, let me ask you this. What do you think, and I mean, obviously there's the easy answer to it, but what do you think ghosts are in a way? Like, I guess I mean, like, kind of like what belief line do you kind of go in with what ghosts are?
Well, actually, I do a program with clubs and organizations and stuff that I go around the country sharing, called Things That Go Bump in the Night, and I have another one called A Few Favorite Haunts. And in those programs, I talk about what has been arrived at as a consensus in terms of what really is going on. Some of this, there is scientific evidence. Others, it's just the consensus of those who have done the studying. And this is one in the consensus round. I mean, the one thing that we know for sure is that where there is a reputable documentation of a ghost occurring, the first thing we know is that the ghost that's occurring is in fact somebody who had died. They're not somebody in a coma. They're not somebody that's somehow in two places at one time. This is actually a documented person. Their death has been documented, but for some reason they're showing up in this particular location. That's reality. That's specific. The consensus of those who study this is that those creatures are ghosts because for some reason they have unfinished business in this world. Sometimes that unfinished business is their own. Sometimes that unfinished business has to do with someone else.
Yeah, which I mean, that I kind of agree with that. That is one of the common beliefs, but there's also the belief that sometimes ghosts are still stuck here because they're afraid of where they're going to go if they move on.
Yeah, I've read that. I'm not sure that, that's a possibility. One of the things that I was surprised when I did this research is that there is a very solid belief in ghosts in every culture in the world. That in every religion there is some part of that religion's doctrine or dogma has a belief in ghosts embedded in it. Now, those ghost beliefs are not the same from Buddhist to Hindu to Jewish to Christian, but they exist in all of those areas.
Yes.
But, like, for example, the Hindus believe that ghosts are associated with people who died only associated with people who died unexpected deaths, usually accidents or murders. That's just an example. But I was, my argument is, okay, it's kind of like Noah and the flood. Those of us who are Christian were all told the story about Noah and the flood.
Yep.
And when we were told that, we weren't sure if it was metaphor or if it was real. Since then, since I've grown up and read about a lot of other religions, the first thing I learned was almost every religion has a story of the flood. And now we have scientific evidence that, in fact, a flood did occur.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I'm segueing to that is if every religion has this belief in ghosts, then it is certainly more than, frivolous things about that little kids enjoy. There must be some reality, some underlying reality, if every single religion has that belief, had it 100 years past, still have that as part of their religion,
Yeah, the Great Flood is in every religion, every every mythological storyline. There's always a flood at some point, and
right.
It's interesting, and I mean, it lends credence to the fact that they wrote about it after the fact, and they just said, "Oh, God was angry, or He wanted to get rid of this race, and He just washed everything away." But it's just, I mean,
well, they use a theological argument harnessing an actual event that occurred.
Yeah, I mean, which kind of lends credence to my fact that, well, to what I've been saying for years, that the Bible is it's a book. First and foremost, it's a story, and it may have a lot of metaphors in it and a lot of other literary uses to try to make people fear or believe in this entity. But it's just, to me, like, because I was brought up Christian as well, and as I got older, I kind of fell out of it. I kind of start to poke holes in it, because that's, you want to rebel against what you're brought up in, and
of course. Yep.
And you want to go try to poke the hole. So I would watch all the documentaries about, oh, where is Noah's Ark? If that really happened, where's the Ark now? Or where did it crash? Or where's the Garden of Eden? Like, I try to watch all that stuff so I could try to have my arguments ready for people who are true religious. But, you grow up and you learn that maybe everything's not the way we think it should be, just black and white. Like, there's always a little in between.
But here's my point that has to do with ghosts. If all of those religions have this story of the flood, well, the reason they all have that story is because there really was a flood. the different religions are simply looking at it a different way and using that actual event to tell the story that they want to tell, which is fine. That's okay. We all learn from real things. I'm simply saying the same thing must be true about ghosts, because every religion has a belief in ghosts. So it's pretty hard to dismiss and say, well, that's not possible. It couldn't exist. My answer would be, well, then how come every religion believes in ghosts at some point?
Exactly. I mean, I use the same exact argument for Bigfoot, because every country has their own version of Bigfoot.
They do. You're right. Yeah.
So, I mean, it makes sense. And I truly believe that. I mean, I live in a house that's haunted with a spirit. So,
I heard that in one of your other episodes. Yeah.
So I fully believe in them, and I have for a long, long time. Because, I mean, energy has to go somewhere, as Einstein said. It can't just dissipate like into thin air, but it has to be it can't be destroyed, or it can only be moved around. Which,
now, have you had any luck in having a Ghostbuster come and talk to your ghosts and encourage them to move on?
We had paranormal investigators come in a little over a year ago, and they just basically proved to me that there was something here before I wanted to admit it, and we communicated with it supposedly. But they were not trying to get it to leave. They were trying to get it to calm down, like just to calm down and be at peace in the house. But I've been talking to some previous guests of the show to maybe have one of them come on, and I mean, not come on, but come here, and I actually have one who will come and take care of it. But it's just a matter of, there's different aspects of it. I really don't want to talk bad about anybody that's been on my show before, but I have other people interested as well. So, I mean, it's a work in progress at this point. I mean, he's been silent lately. Like, he hasn't really been being a nuisance. So I'm not as much of a hurry to get rid of him as I used to be.
Well, one of the things that I discovered in my research about ghosts is that, contrary to public wide opinion, almost no ghosts, I need to rephrase that. Almost no documented ghosts have been shown to be malevolent. There are a few, but the vast majority of them are either benevolent, or they might like to cause that. They are what they like to cause some mischief.
Yeah,
they're a poltergeist. They like to create a little problem here and there, or they sometimes just like to let it be known that they're there.
Well, let me ask this one question first to get to the real question I want to ask, because I really can't ask that unless I ask this first. What, in all your research, what have you theorized happens after we die?
What have I theorized? That's a very good question. Well, I do think we go to a better place, but that doesn't mean that everybody's ready to go to the better place. What I've learned in the research, no, that's not really true. What those who've done the studying that I have read believe that these people, like your ghost, there's a reason why that ghost is hanging around your house. I don't know what the reason is, but there's a reason why he's here, not someplace else, not passing on. One of the examples I like to use is the example of Al Unser Jr. Do you know the story about his ghost?
What was the name again?
Al, the NASCAR racer.
Oh no,
in 2004, Al Unser Jr. Was doing a practice run on a track in South Carolina, and I don't know the technical details, the mechanical details of what happened, but he crashed, and it was just he and his pit crew on this track, and he crashed on the other end of the track. Car explodes, everything goes up in flames. The pit crew is running across the thing trying to rescue him. When they get there, they find Al Unser Jr. Hope I'm getting my name right. They find him on the other side of the track, about 20 yards from his car, unconscious, in the grass, laying on the ground. When he finally comes to, he tells them that an angel, a ghost, he used both words, pulled him from that car. And then later on, he said it was the ghost of his father, Al Unser Sr.
I have
Looks
heard
like
this story now.
I'm saying I said the
Yeah.
name wrong. It's Earnhardt. It's Dale Earnhardt and Al.
Oh, okay. See, I
That's
would
where I
have.
screwed you up, right? Yeah.
Because I watch it. I mean, I still might not have recognized it by the name, even because I'm not a NASCAR fan by any means, but
And-
I have heard the story about a NASCAR driver that was saved out of a car by a ghost
But
/ angel.
okay,
I've heard that story.
I'm still trying to answer your question. So the argument would be, well, Earnhardt Senior's ghost stayed because his son needed him in that one situation. Now he's passed on. No, there's not. Dale Earnhardt Jr. never said anything about having any experience with his father's ghost after that or anything else. It was just that one situation. But that's an example, I think, of trying to explain why they're here and they're not passed on.
Well, I mean, okay. Well, the question I was trying to get to by that question, because, well, from what I've been told by multiple mediums and psychics and clairvoyants, is that, and this is what they've been told by some spirits they've communicated with as well, is that basically when we go, we are basically, our spirits are sent up to this kind of like a waiting room area almost, and there is a place beyond that if you achieve everything you're supposed to achieve, you go there, but no one knows what it really is. I mean, you can call it heaven if you want, but I don't like to put a name on. I like to put names on it. But basically, it's like a waiting room to come back down if you haven't accomplished everything you're supposed to accomplish yet. And when it's your turn to go into another body, you come back down.
Oh, no, I've not heard the body part. That's you mean like a reincarnation option, you mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like a reincarnation idea.
Okay, this is new to me. I'm not saying that that's not correct. That's just not what and to be honest, you have had people who have spent much more time and have a great deal more experience in this area. My area has been really narrowly focused on researching documented ghost sightings and then kind of digging into what are the details behind those that I could use in my fiction to make that more realistic. So I don't want to go outside. I don't want to go beyond I want to stay in my lane.
Of course. I mean, I understand that.
And not do something beyond that.
That's fine. I was just curious if your research ever went towards that area, but it's all good. But let me ask you this though: what in your research have you looked into shadow people at all, which some people consider a form of ghost?
Yeah, I've not. I know that I'm familiar with the name and I've read about that, but I certainly don't have enough knowledge from any research to be able to say one way or the other. I mean, I know about orbs. I've spent a lot of research on orbs. A lot of the experts on ghosts believe that it is very, very difficult for a ghost to make itself known, to do things like to have an actual human image, to touch on the shoulder, those kinds of things take a great deal of psychic energy. That's the theory anyway. So many times the only occurrences of a ghost is an orb, a bright light that is inside in a room, and it moves kind of flying saucer like around the room, bounces around the room.
Yeah.
I've witnessed those myself personally. I've seen those myself. So I know I can say I saw something that didn't have inside a room, no light, no trick, no anything else. So I can't say that I know that that's how that works, but I can tell you there wasn't any trick to it.
Yeah, orbs, which I mean they're also sometimes called ghost lights, but those fascinate me to some degree because I mean, yes, people try to say, "Oh no, that's just, like when they capture them on camera." People try to say, "Oh no, that's just dust you're capturing that's hitting the light right." I'm like, no, they've been captured on train tracks in famous places. Yep. They've been captured all over Gettysburg at night. Like I know it's the original idea behind them was like, oh, it's the people who die in train accidents, the conductor, it's his lantern trying to lead them to where they need to go. But I mean, that's more of a tall tale than anything, I think.
Yeah,
But
right. Yeah, when the orb I saw was in Nashville, inside an interior room that no one was in.
yeah,
So and one in Ohio too, another place that I had been. So, but and then the people who study this say that the reason that the orb exists is that the being is able to project that much energy, which is much easier or less difficult to do than actually to create what looks like a human form.
yeah. Which I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I don't
Well,
know if you heard. I don't know if you heard on one of the episodes I listened to, but I have a whole theory about like a ghost evolution type theory. But I won't get into it now. But it's a long-winded thing. But
that I don't know. No.
it's basically an idea that I'll summarize it basically that ghosts when someone first dies and they're a ghost stuck on Earth, they are basically a misty form because that's all they can do at that point.
Yeah.
And then eventually, my belief is that they turn to shadow people after that because they're able to kind of look like a human, but not fully yet. And then eventually they get to the full apparition phase where you can see them clearly and you can tell who they are just by looking at them. So that's my theory. I mean, I didn't really research into it or anything. It's just kind of something I came up with one day. Like, what if that's why all these different things exist that we see, but we can't explain them? Like,
Well, that I would say that's at least a reasonable explanation of it, or at least as reasonable as anybody else has been able to come up with. One of the things that I uncovered in my research, I don't know if you know this or not, but according to two studies that were done in the last 20 years by two different groups, about 50% of Americans believe in ghosts. One study actually had the number at 48%, the other one was at 51%. The other thing that two additional studies, one by the AP and one by a university, they asked people, have you ever had an experience with a ghost? Have you seen a ghost, felt a ghost, heard a ghost? This one about blew me out of the water. 1 in 5 people said that they had. 21% actually was the number in the study. So 1 in 5. So that is an overwhelming number of. I mean, we're talking, in this country alone, and actually the numbers are higher in other countries than they are in America. But in this country alone, that's, hundreds and thousands, probably in the millions of people.
Oh, I mean, I fully believe that because one, just the amount of people I see in paranormal groups on Facebook and Twitter that will gladly like tell their story, and every day there's new stories coming out from people about occurrences they've had happen, and two, all the ghost hunter television shows that are on TV in the last 10 years wouldn't be able to have an audience if people didn't believe.
You got that right. Well, and I can validate that for you because, as I mentioned, I have these two presentations that I do about ghosts that I share with groups, and not every time. I've done these presentations about 50 times, probably 10 different states all over the U.S. About every other time, somebody in the group, after the thing's up, will come up to me and go, "Can I talk to you?" He said, "Do you have time to go over and visit?" In Greenville, it was this hotel. You want to come over and see? I own this hotel. I'm positive this hotel is haunted. Here's why. So almost every place, it's not every place, but every other place I go, somebody's got a actual personal ghost story that they want me to either research or tell or learn about or whatever.
Yep. I mean, it's not surprising to me at all. I mean, my family's boring, but my wife's family, they live in a severely haunted house. Most of them did for years, and they have tons of stories to tell about things that happened in that house or around that house. Like, it was built on Native American burial ground. They found out their grandfather found out and rebuilt it. But
okay.
So I mean, that's a
that's
a whole nother level, and that house is just creepy. I used to spend the night there spend every other weekend there when I was first dating her, and it's a creepy house. Like, it's just, you get the feeling you're being watched 24/7.
Oh, okay. Creepy in the sense of you felt eyes were on you.
That, and then like you feel like you see stuff out of the corner of your eye at night when you're walking through the house.
Yeah, that may be the case. The second book in my series I set at Cape May, New Jersey. And for those that don't know where that is, that's at the very tail end of New Jersey, at the very bottom. In fact, it's exit 0 on the Garden State Parkway. And I was amazed when I chose that because it's a gorgeous town, beautiful town. Has a lot to recommend it as a wonderful setting for a story. But then when I did my research, I found it's actually the most haunted seaport on the Eastern Shore. And it has a whole heck of bed and breakfasts. And almost everyone has their own story about ghost does this. You'll see the ghost do this. I was flabbergasted. It's just kind of taken for granted.
Yeah, I mean that's the most haunted port. I mean I can believe it because it's around like where the history of America is the longest history, and
Right.
I mean I would have said what could have been there, New York or Boston, but I believe it could be New Jersey as well. That's not bad.
This is what they claim, that it's the most haunted. It's the most haunted seaport. Now, I didn't know this. People have been coming to that seaport for 150 years. It's obviously only good seaport weather in the summer and early fall. Nobody would want to be hanging out on the beach at this time of year in Cape May. But
God no.
But it has a very long history, and it's kind of an interesting history. It had a railroad that people from New York would come in the 1800s, and this was their vacation spot in the summer. Would come down there to the vacation.
Yeah, makes sense.
So therefore, they have a long history, and they have they have the largest collection of Victorian architecture in the United States, except for San Francisco. But in their case, theirs is all in a very small. Have you ever been to Cape May? Very tiny town.
No, I've been to parts of New Jersey because I grew up in New York, but I never really spent that much time in like the beaches of Jersey.
The last population count was about 5,400 people, and they have 170 Victorian bed and breakfasts and mansions.
Jeez.
So, and most of them, not all, but most of them date back to the past century. Yeah. In fact, the story is that in the 1800s, there was a big fire that wiped out nearly the whole town. So the whole town was rebuilt at the same time in what was then modern architecture, which we today call Victorian architecture. Hence all the Victorian, and they've been well kept up over the years at great expense. But
I'm sure, I'm sure, but I'm sure in the summertime they also make a lot of that back.
So. They have done very well. I have no doubt about it. It's a huge investment if you're one looking for that, but it's one that can really make a lot of money coming back in. And people actually come to this particular one because they want to hear about the ghost that's supposed to live in this. Angel of the Seas is one of the ones that I write about in my book, because there's a ghost that lives in Angel of the Seas.
Oh, okay.
And there's a ghost that lives in the Inn of Cape May. One of the things that I did, now my ghosts in my stories, I have 3 haunted shore mysteries. Each of the central mystery is entirely fictional. The ghost I make up is fictional. The story, the victim is fictional. The murder is fictional. But what I do is I pepper all of those stories with very realistic details. And in the case of Cape May, I actually included 2 of the documented ghosts in Cape May as part of the fictional story of my cold case murder mystery, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
one of those is the ghost that's supposed to haunt the Inn of Cape May.
Interesting. So you got me kind of curious now, because if your first book is in Chesapeake Bay, I believe you said, or
that's right,
and your second book's in Cape May, where's the third book?
Is the third book is on the Gulf Coast of Florida.
Oh, okay.
Because I wanted to put it there. So
yeah,
I have a rationale for how my character gets moved from. They're actually in the third book. My protagonist and his then girlfriend, new wife, is on their honeymoon in Crystal River in Florida.
Okay, nice.
And I did that because I wanted someplace warm. So the fourth one, which is in development, is going to be my protagonist is from Michigan. up on the lakes up in Michigan. So he's going back to Michigan for the fourth adventure in the series. So it won't be out until another year or so.
Interesting. And I'm assuming that you do go to all these places and actually do the research.
I do a great deal of research in each place. I talk to the locals. I eat at the restaurants. I work with the local libraries there. I work with Chamber of Commerce. I send those people draft copies of the manuscripts to make sure that I am, one, getting all the details right, and two, making sure that I present the area in a positive light so it doesn't reflect negatively on the area, because I'm writing about a murder. So, there's that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. As long as you're putting the murder as fictitious in the book, then yeah, I'm sure they don't mind. But I mean,
the books are about really serious issues. I mean, we're talking very lightheartedly about ghosts, which I'm enjoying, but I don't want to. So, for example, in the first book, the murder is about racial injustice. It's the murder that my protagonist is actually investigating, which occurred some 30 years earlier, is a lynching that happened at this school. In the second book, it's all about human trafficking. And I chose that because in the Cape May area, Cape May, New Jersey, that's one of the largest human trafficking networks in the United States, because human trafficking follows the same shipping routes that everything else gets shipped in America.
Of course.
And then the third one in Florida is all about the abuse of migrant workers in the South. So this takes place primarily on the Gulf Coast, but all the farming is in the central Florida. So they do a little traveling in the story. So even though the ghosts are, I think, enjoyable and likable as characters in the story as they are developed. For example, in the third book, the ghosts are actually ghosts of two young toddlers, 5 and 6 year olds, two young kids that had been killed. I'm not afraid to tackle a serious issue as part of that story.
Which I commend you for doing that, because those are all issues that need to be looked at and dealt with, and it's a interesting way of putting them out there, which will get people to read it and pay attention to it. So I commend you on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not I'm not naive. People are going to pick my books up because they like a good mystery, or they like a little woo-woo, or there's a little bit of romance, or even I've had people pick them up because they like a location. I've always wondered about Cape May, blah, blah, blah. But part of my goal is that in their enjoyment, they'll be exposed to some things like when I did my research on human trafficking, I was stunned by what I did not know. I was stunned by how much we know about human trafficking, but it really never gets to the media, never gets to spend, none of those things. So I was trying to use this story as a way of at least opening people's eyes to say, well, maybe this is something we should be paying more attention to.
Yeah, I mean,
we lose a girl. There are a few guys, but we lose a teen girl to human trafficking in this country every 5 minutes. I mean, that's a staggering statistic. And most of the human traffic victims are not Americans. They're Central America or they're Eastern European, but there's plenty of regular small town American girls, few boys, but mostly girls, that get sucked into that web, and either they end up in drugs, dead, or in prison usually.
Which, I mean, yeah, it's scary and the fact that people don't look into it makes you think more and more, like, why are people not looking into it more? Like, who's behind it and financing it that they're not looking into it? Like, it's just
why is it not getting more attention? Exactly. Yeah. So that's the reason I decided to. I mean, it is organic to the area. It is something that is real about that particular area, but that I wanted something that's a major issue that people could latch onto, and that's part of my. That's part of my shtick for my books.
Which, do you have an idea where the fourth one's going to take place yet, or do you not want to spell that?
Well, no, it's not that I'm not afraid to tell people. I'm researching several locations let me rephrase that. So my protagonist, although there's no part of any of the story takes place in Michigan, we know that he was in the southern area of southern Michigan and got dumped by his fiancee there, and that's how he ends up transporting himself across the country. So I've kind of laid that as a groundwork for his extended family lives up there. So he's going back to see the extended family, and they're going to have a summer trip to an aunt's house that's one of these huge houses that are on one of the lakes. So this summer, I really had planned to do this past summer, but my wife had some serious health issues, so we're putting it off a year. But so this summer, I'm going to do a great deal more research and find a location that I think works, that has the draw that I think might be, and then it also might have some kind of haunted history. I usually pick places that are not super well known. I don't do a Miami or Fort Lauderdale or Malibu, anything like that. I'm trying to pick places that maybe a little less known, so that's part of what people may be interested in, because they'll discover someplace they've never heard of before. And I'm going to look for someplace like that. And I've done my research. There's a number of towns like that'll fit really well. So,
oh yeah, I mean there's a lot of small towns out there that have famous haunting stories or crybaby bridges or like all these types of phenomenon that are associated with ghosts. So
what I expect, Jeremy, is that I'll go and do my visiting. I'll find a mansion someplace on the water, and it'll just inspire me. That's kind of how the first book got started. I was actually traveling in New England, and I'm an educator. I've spent 40 years serving children in Ohio as a teacher, a college professor, and a school leader. Ran school districts for 28 years. So I'm always interested in schools wherever I go. That's kind of like I found this incredibly interesting school in a town in Maine, I think, someplace in New England. And I photographed it, liked it. I liked it so much that I thought, oh, no, this would be really good. So the visual image of that, which I have recreated in my first story, Blood on the Chesapeake, it has a prayer pit, a widow's walk at the top that I actually have the lynching occurring on some 30 years earlier. So it became the frame that eventually became the story. I'm expecting I'll find something akin to that when I travel to Michigan and go, oh, that would work right there. So I might take right where it is in that town, or I may take that and transplant it into another town that I like better. But that's part of the fun of, that's part of how I envision a story, how the story comes alive for me. I've got the skeleton of the story, a little pieces of here and there, and maybe what the ghost will be like and what the issue is behind it. But all the rest of it that makes the story meshed, I kind of wait till I'm on location, finding the place before I kind of get there.
Which I have to imagine is kind of fun too, to be able to scout out locations like that. Like I would love to be able to do that and actually be able to write things about it, but my writing skills have diminished over the years greatly, as much as I hate that fact. But I use oral skills now. But
as I tell my children, God gives us all different gifts. You obviously have a gift for podcasting, so that's not to be shouted at. That's good enough in itself.
Yeah.
If I can I give a shout out to my podcast while I'm on here? I'll make sure that.
I was going to ask shortly anyway to have you tell us about your podcast, because I love hearing about the podcast.
Good segue. It has nothing to do with ghosts. It has nothing to do with the paranormal. Well, only peripherally. The podcast is called Great Stories About Great Storytellers. And in that podcast, I tell kind of the weird and sometimes unusual backstories about either famous authors, famous poets, or famous directors. So listeners will learn about the author they already know. So, for example, John Grisham. But they'll know something about how he got started that they never heard about, how that happened. Or last year, one of the poets I did was Edgar Allan Poe. And I told the story of how he wrote one of his most famous poems called Annabel Lee, about this girl in Savannah in Charleston, who he fell in love with as a teenager, or he might have been 20, 19 or 20. And she fell in love, but she was from a very rich family and he was a poor guy, poor soldier. And the parents wouldn't let them stay together. She committed suicide. He went to her grave. Anyway, so that people know about Annabelle Lee. If you studied Edgar Allan Poe in high school, I guarantee you read Annabelle Lee. But they don't know this background story. So those are the kinds of stories that I tell that people go, oh, I remember. Like I tell the story of Tom Clancy. You know who Tom Clancy is, the most famous techno thriller in the world. Been dead, I don't know, decades, a year, maybe 15 years, whatever. He's still having stories come out because other people are writing under his name. I talk about how he got started. He was a plain old vanilla insurance agent. And I talk about the story of how he went from that to becoming this mega author that everybody loved. So it's those kinds of stories that I like behind the people that I share. It's kind of fun. I do a lot of research on each one to find something that's kind of a unique handle, and then tell them that background that they might probably have not heard of.
Have you done one for Stephen King yet? I have to ask.
I've not. He's on my list. I only do one a month, so I'm in my second year. We're on 14 now, I think, or 12. Yeah, 13. And I have a schedule of ones. I try to make it a nice variety. So, for example, I try to make sure there's a director in the group. Try to make sure there's a poet or two. I try to make sure the genres are covered. So I've got who's on the one for this month is Ray Bradbury.
Ooh.
The one for next month, and I try to make sure there's a mixture of classic authors like Ray Bradbury and Mark Twain, for example, with current authors like J.K. Rowling, okay, and Ken Follett. And there's always a poet. So next month is Emily Dickinson. It's a really interesting thing about her background. That'll be a lot of fun. And there's always a director in the group. So last year I did Steven Spielberg, the most famous director most successful director in the world. And this year I'll be doing Alfred Hitchcock. We talked about his storytelling ability. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot, like you. It's a lot of work to get it to where it's appreciable. Now my efforts are far more modest than yours. Each episode's about 12 minutes, about 11 or 12 minutes. So it's a quick listen for people who are interested in learning about the other side of authors and directors that they know, but people they don't know about. If you're old enough, I'm not sure if you're old enough or not. If you're old enough to remember Paul Harvey's The Rest of the Story, this is the Paul Harvey The Rest of the Story about authors, directors, and poets.
Well, I definitely plan on checking it out because I do love hearing about all those people. I hope you do an episode. I hope you do an episode on Sylvia Plath eventually. But
I don't have her in my list, and I will make sure I have, because I know about Sylvia, and I should have said I also try to make sure that I have a mixture of male and female. I'm trying as best as I can to have some diversity in there, although because of the Western canon, that's been kind of hard to. Those people who are diverse authors have not been as plentiful and as knowledgeable as.
Yeah.
One of the limitations of mine, I don't know if I can say it's a limitation, is that what I've noticed when I look at the numbers who are listening to, the numbers are always hinged to who the author or poet or director is. The more knowledgeable and more famous that person is, the better the numbers get.
Yeah, it's the same with my music podcast I do. It's the artists we're talking about. It changes how many listeners listen to it. I mean, we got huge in Finland because I love a Finnish band called Nightwish. So I mean, it's all about pandering to the people who listen to your show and finding the audience that they want to hear what they want to hear about. So, but at the end of the day, podcasting's it's a numbers game sometimes, but
Well, I'm trying to balance. Well, I want to make sure that I have this in there, but if nobody's going to bother to pick up and listen, then it really won't give exposure to those individuals anyway. So I'm kind of trying to find my way there. And I'm still relatively new. You've been at this a long time. I'm kind of in the early stages. I enjoy it. I will tell you, I've been very surprised at how much work it takes to get 12 minutes of finished piece up and at a serviceable level that people will enjoy to listen to.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that, but I've actually been doing this for less than a year.
Oh, really?
So
You have a lot of episodes for less than a year. So
I release twice a week because the paranormal is such a dynamic field of so many topics that I've gotten a lot of guests.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure. And the ones I listen to, I purposely tried to listen to very different ones. So I listened to the author about the Atlantis. I listened to the Ghost Bike. I listened to the Hypnotist one. I'm missing another one I listened to. So on purpose, I was trying to kind of get a selection of. So I had some idea of, how you run things and what you were looking for and what your audience is expecting. I hope I've lived up to those expectations anyway.
I have found that my audience loves me talking to authors. They love it. Like, it's a nice, a lot of the authors I talk to are also mediums or whatever, but they like the authors too. They're just authors. They don't have any paranormal abilities of their own usually, and they're just authors who love the topics, so they want to do the research to write the books. And I think you excelled at that. So my second episode, I think, or third episode, was with Brandy Alexander, who she came on to talk about the first book she has wrote in her series, which will have 4 or 5 books in the next 5-6 years. But still, one of my favorite episodes I ever did was with her, because I actually had the time to read the whole book before I talked to her, and I was in love with it. I was in love with it. But it's
now what paranormal aspect did she have in her book?
Kind of similar to yours, but not a different aspect of it. She had a man who, when they were kids, his brother died saving him from falling in the ice, and the brother that died, the spirit of that brother helped, basically stayed around and protects the little brother through life, and with the help of multiple spirits, and he basically became a detective, kind of, or he solves like murder mysteries and stuff for like the LAPD, because he has his brother and the other 2 ghost friends he has can go anywhere and see anything, basically, so they can find out stuff a lot faster than other people can. And it develops into a whole storyline about demons try to take over Earth, and so it goes, like I said, it goes a different route than your books go, but it's more almost religion fiction, but it was very interesting. And it reminded me of a lot of what's the word, science fiction, paranormal fiction I read as a kid. Like, it reminded me of a lot of like young adult books like that I read as a kid that I loved. So it was right up my alley, and I was recovering from surgery, so I actually had the time to sit there and read it all day, and I think I finished the whole book in 3 days. It wasn't that long, but still, I finished it in 3 days, and you can hear in the episode my excitement about it. You really can. But I also was a brand new podcaster at that point, and I wanted to make sure the first author I want to make sure I read her book. So
good idea.
Nowadays I try to, but the amount of books I'd have to read to do that would be immeasurable. So
it would certainly be challenging. Well, before I leave, let me give at least a couple of plugs for me.
Please.
First of all, everything they wanted to know, either about my books or my podcast or my research or my presentations, they can they on my website, which is just www.authorrandyoverbeck.com. Couldn't be much simpler. They can catch me on Twitter. It's at Overbeck Randy, or else on Facebook, which is just Randy Overbeck. So I'm easy to find if they're interested, and I'll be happy to connect with them if they're so inclined. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and share some thoughts about the other world that shadows ours and our belief about that.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you, Randy. You've been a great guest to talk to, and I've learned a lot about different places I never really been to or thought about that much. So I actually look forward to reading your book someday, though I'm definitely going to add them to my list of books I plan to read someday.
Hey, I've got a long list of that as well. I understand. So
yeah,
I'm sure you'll enjoy them when you get there.
Yeah, full-time job, 3 podcasts, 2 kids, 2 dogs, a wife. It doesn't leave much time for reading books, but
yes, life does get in the way of all those other,
unfortunately,
all the other choices. That's right.
But I will thank you for coming on, and my listeners, you all know where you can find me. Be sure to check out. I will put Randy's website right in the description of this podcast, so anybody can just click on it and go to it. And other than that, just thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did, and I will see you all in half a week. Randy, thank you for being on. It's been an honor.
Jeremy, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.